Hey, good morning, afternoon, evening, whatever. Sam here at Reloved Guitars Workshop, and I've kind of moved on a lot with this guitar since you last saw it. So let me show you what we've got. I'll just describe what we did because it's not that complicated, so it kind of wasn't worth... Hello!
Oh yeah.
Hello, thanks very much. Cheers, mate. Excellent.
Mr. Windsor, is it?
Yeah. Brilliant, thanks for coming around.
No problem.
Saves me sitting in the house so I can get on with work. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Cheers,
sir.
sir.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Real life. Yeah, so where was we? Yeah, so this kit, last time you saw it, I think it was just going through the pieces. And I didn't record all the bits and bobs just now because it's not that complicated. So what I did with it between then and now is two things really. First of all, I lacquered the neck and I did it with some vintage lacquer as a sort of base. First of all, I cut the headstock to a template and sanded it a bit. It's not perfect. This, I haven't smoothed it all the way around here. Just and then I lacquered it with some vintage amber and then some clear coats on top of that. Did it very slowly, and for a change, I didn't get any runs and gloops, which is very unusual for me. And that's pretty much all I did to this until now. So that sat around. Then since then, I've put the tuners on and put the string trees on. So we've got the little Morris logo and we're ready to go, and it's a nice vintagey looking colour. It's a bit better than the basic thing. What I did with the body is I sanded it down, obviously not perfectly, you can see some spots, but sanded it down and then put some stain on it, which is the first time I've ever stained anything. So again, it wasn't perfect. Bass wood doesn't seem to pick up stain terribly well. It doesn't. There's not a lot of grain to bring out, I should say. It probably takes a stain fine, but it doesn't seem to bring out an awful lot of grain. So I put some stain on there to get a brownish colour, and then I went over with probably 6 to 10 layers in total of True Oil, which is this stuff. And there's so many different descriptions of how to do it, and I didn't really take too much care with it. It wasn't. The purpose of this kit was really to focus on the hardware and the setup rather than get too hung up on the body. So I didn't spend hours sanding this down because that's one of the things that takes forever when you're doing finishing. So it's okay. It's going to be durable, robust, and playable. And hopefully, when we get it playing, it's all going to hang together nicely. So once I'd done the body, I came in this morning and yesterday I switched out the pickups. That's the only difficult thing about this. If you're using the standard stuff, this stuff will just go on absolutely simply, no problem at all. It took me a bit of time because changing out the pickups, and I've put tone riders in here, so it's a massive sort of quality upgrade straight away on the pickups. They don't quite fit, first of all, so you have to do little modifications like a bit of sanding around the edge of this neck pickup hole, and actually this one I had to just sand off the top plate of the pickup a little bit, and to do all that while being very careful not to damage the wiring on the pickup is very, very difficult. You have to exercise massive caution, as I found out to my cost earlier this week when I ruined a pickup. Luckily it wasn't a very expensive one, but still messed up a set that I had paid good money for. And to be honest, it's one of those things that if you're not thinking about it, it's way too easy to damage them, particularly if you're having to do something manual with the pickup as well, like to sand a bit of the plate or something to reshape it, or as is the case on here, to get the pickup mounting screws through the new pickup's base plate, and that's quite tricky, and you end up quite often putting some force into it, which increases the likelihood of something, you one way or another knocking the pickup and doing some damage. So if you're going to change out your pickups, whenever you're handling pickups, be incredibly delicate and gentle with them, and if you're going to change them out, then be doubly so because it's yeah, it's very easy to damage them. So yesterday I exchanged the existing Harley Benton pickups for these tone riders, and got them in the end, and then came back to it this morning and put the hardware on, and that was very, very straightforward. You really don't need it describing. There's almost no way you can go wrong with it. The instructions don't tell you which place on the switch is the neck pickup and which place is the bridge. There's two snap-on connectors, which, by the way, if you change out your pickups, you're going to have to splice those onto the new pickups. But the connections are done by connecting blocks. And under the switch here, on the switch, it doesn't tell you, obviously, unless you know instinctively which is which. I don't ever seem to know. I kind of hit and miss. But so what you can do is you can just put them on one way, test them out, and then make sure you've got it the right way. If you have got it back to front, you can at that point then just very simply exchange them over and get them the right way round. The Harley Benton kit helpfully already solders the jack plug for you, so that you're able to push a jack plug into it and do that test to see which pickup's live without before you have to screw in the jack plate. Once you screw that in, you do need to have a way of tightening it down once it's in, or you can, if you want to, you can tighten this receiving part, the female part of the jack plug, into the little metal housing. You have to do that either by hand with some pliers, or if you have a little tool like I've got, you can do it afterwards, where you put the tool in, turn it backwards, and then use some pliers, or if you've got a ring spanner that will fit in there over the top of this shaft here, then you can tighten it up. I did it with pliers. Sometimes you get it kicking up a little bit of a scuff on the nut, but that's no big deal really. Okay, so we're almost there. That was putting it together, really straightforward. Can't go wrong with it. And actually, it was looking a bit dull or boring in my eyes beforehand, but actually now it's starting to look quite nice, and we're at this lovely place where it's time to put the neck and the body together. Now, I commented at the beginning, these are a really, really snug fit, and with the plastic in, I'm just noting it's got even snugger. So it's probably means I'm not going to get it in one go. So this is another place where once you've got the hardware starting to go in, it's more than likely you're going to have to do a modification. Now, there's lots of ways you can do this. You can get a jeweler's file, for example. If you're in the mood to do it that way, you get a little jeweler's file and or two, and you can just work the edge down like this. And it's very, you want to do it very slowly and only enough so that you're following the line of the pocket. You don't want to make some random great big chops out of it. And then, once you've done a little bit, you want to try it again and see if it goes in at all. And if it doesn't, come back. The other way I found in the past that works is to do a kind of just a scraping action with a sharp blade. That's quite effective. You can see the stuff coming off as a little peeled kind of rind. The plastic comes off. You probably need to be set up in a slightly different position to how I've got it here, but this is quite effective. You can see the plastic coming off. So I would probably be wanting to have it over at this angle and just scraping away gently until I'm also taking away a bit of wood, so I know I've made contact or brought it to the same level of the wood. But I think this blade is probably most effective actually. Still not quite there. Also, you can blow away your plastic dust if you don't want it embedded in all your bits and pieces. Sound like Austin Powers there. So we're nearly there now, and when it's ready, we'll find it just dropping in, but it's still a fraction off. I don't want to push it against the plastic. I'd much rather wear it down gradually. I put a little note on my Facebook page this morning. If you haven't seen any videos from me for a while. It's probably good. It gives you a chance to have a break from my endless chattering. But the reason being is, I think, I can't remember how long ago now, but we switched over from BT to Sky broadband package, and ever since then it's been quite a struggle to upload. Now, I didn't have that problem much before in the past because I was regularly working away in London, so I took advantage of the big cities broadband, excessive bandwidth, so I could, from the office I was working, and I could get huge downloads done uploads done very quickly. But I was finding it a real struggle at home, and obviously not going up anywhere near as often. In fact, I haven't been up for quite a while now, as there's not been any work in that area. It means I've just been stuck without decent bandwidth to upload, and I've been trying repeatedly to do it at home, and what happens is, been discovering more and more, is that uploading chokes the downloading, which seems really stupid because we're not on fantastic speeds anyway, but we're supposed to be getting 20 down and about 1.5 up. Now, to some of you guys in your high-tech Silicon Valley homes, that's ludicrously small, but believe me, out in the country here, that was pretty exciting. We'd only just recently got access to that kind of rate, but despite having access to it, and fibre having come to us finally to a cabinet about 200-300 yards away, we were kind of lined up for things to improve, but they didn't. And actually what I found is, recently now, not only can't I upload quickly, I can't upload at all, and uploading kills downloading. So I spoke to the Sky customer service people, and they absolutely assured me that it's quite normal, that you can't upload. Talk to me, as they do, talk to you like you're an idiot and that you don't know anything technical. And the guy was basically saying, oh no, you can't upload and download at the same time. And in a sense, funny enough, he was telling the truth, but I've discovered that the problem lies with the hardware and the setup of the Sky router, as we call it in the UK, and other service providers who don't use that technology or that router are entirely able to upload and download at the same time. So we've decided to jump ship on that, not a moment too soon, and it's going to take a month or so to get that sorted out. But in the meantime, I'm going to be taking a trip to the managed offices at Regis in Plymouth. I had a chat with them this morning, and they have really business quality speeds down there, and at very reasonable rates too. So I'm going to go down there and give it a test in the next couple of days, just for an hour or so, just to see how fast I can upload video, and then take it from there. But I suspect it will be a really good solution for uploading Reloved guitars vid. Okay, we are in, clearing away whatever plastic shards. So got the fit now, and the thing to, oops, not quite permanently in, I'm just going to push it right in. We're in, and the thing to do is, before you commit to any screws, neck bolts, is to always just go around and make sure, get rid of some of this onto the floor, always go around and make sure that it's seated nicely, and there's no point kind of tightening everything up if there's a gap or there's something obstructing it. So before you go anywhere near the bolts, ensure that it's nicely seated, which this is. So we now I'm just going to put a towel down for this, because I'm putting it face down. I don't want all these bits to get onto the pickups and whatever. So on its face, nicely seated, and I'm going to put the square pad down first, and then going to put the neck plate on. I've been very impressed with everything about this guitar. The bridge pickup plate was just slightly off in terms of its holes. Oh, sorry. Oh, down. Yeah, the bridge unit was just slightly off, but it was not anywhere near far enough to worry about. It just meant I had to kind of hold it in a particular way to make sure all the 4 screws went in properly. In fact, I've got 2. No, I've put the other 2 in. But it you know, I sort of panicked for a second, thinking, oh god, I'm going to have to re-drill something here. And actually, the amounts that it was adrift were, you know, 0.5 millimetre at most or something. It was, now I've got the only one thing here. I've got a bent screw, which is a bit quality control-ish. That's the only downside of this whole kit so far, and I can probably live with that, to be honest. So I'm just going to go around and put these corner ones in first. And in fact, they're all a little bit bendy. How weird is that? Chinese screws. I mean, everything's made in China when it comes to guitars, most things. But yeah, absolutely happy as anything with this kit. I can see why it has so much positive reviews on. They're all slightly bent. How bizarre. Yeah, you can see why it has so many fabulous reviews on the Harley Benton website. You know, they're genuine reviews, you can tell. And it's just, you know, if you want to make your first guitar, there is nothing here that's going to tax you. And, you know, it's well under taxing for me compared to, you know, what I've done in the last year of doing this. So, but I didn't buy it for that. I bought it to see how I could make it play and how I could improve the tone of it, and see whether it, you know, this was a good basic starting point to do some really nice upgrades. So I'm just going ahead and tightening up these bolts, nuts, screws, that's the right word. Screws, not bolts, are they? The screws. Tightening up the neck screws, and that's enough. And ladies and gentlemen, our beast is born. It's the sort of, it's a wonderful moment where your guitar comes to life, truly becomes a guitar for the first moment, and you can sort of stand there and hold it like a real guitar. And I like it already, and I suspect I may have trouble parting with this one as well, which is no good for my wall because it's groaning with guitars. The thing is, every time you make a guitar, even if you're just putting a kit together with a bit of, you know, finishing work or upgrades or whatever, you can't help but really get attached to it because you're spending time with it. It represents, you know, effort and thinking and, you know, time that you've put into it, and it sort of catches you out. You end up sort of thinking, oh, I like this, I want to keep this, but I shouldn't. Mind you, I haven't got a Telecaster of my own, so maybe I should, hey? I mean, I'm going to see how it plays, and if it's good enough, then what I may well do is go straight on and buy another one and do something similar. Now, they supply you with, in the kit, a set of strings, and they are obviously not, oh god, not only is it not the world's highest quality strings, they are also, for some reason, these come in a bit of a bird's nest, and that you've got to be very careful to untangle without getting into some crimps and unhelpful bends. Anyway, that would be really important if you were going to play these strings. And I've used Harley Benton strings before, and I have to say they're entirely adequate. There's nothing at all I found wrong with them. I'm just going to put the string trees on while I'm here. Not string trees, the strap buttons. So we can put it on the strap sooner rather than later. Yeah, so the Harley Benton strings are entirely adequate for this, and even if you were going to play with them, there's no problem at all. But as it happens, I'm probably going to just use them for the next important part of the process, which we haven't even got to yet, which is the fret leveling and the setup of the neck. So although in the original check you could see that this guitar I felt had some pretty good condition fretboard actually compared to many guitars that I've seen, which means ultimately it's probably not going to take that much work to set the or to level the frets and get the frets into a really good condition for a nice low action, but it still means we're going to do it, and it'll still take the same amount of time, but that's to come next. And so it's probably a good idea to use some old strings. I'm going to get the feel of how it plays without leveling the frets. I'm going to just go straight out of the box, if you like, get a sense of how it plays and sounds, and just going to assess then what feels like needs to be done to it. This is a bit annoying, the little rubber foot for the strap button has fallen down, so it doesn't quite sit. That's better. Make sure it sits directly under the strap thing. It's moving again, but it's meant to just squeege it down. Okay, so there we have it, ready to go on a strap, which is great. I've taken them all indoors, so that's sorted out. I'll go and get one in a sec. Okay, so basic guitar, ladies and gentlemen, set up. I think it looks kind of great for a 55 quid guitar. You know, when you think of the amount of money spent on the stain is peanuts. You could do it with inks, you know, any kinds of inks. You could probably I don't know, you could probably do it with watercolour paint, for all I know. This is water-based stain, so anything water-based that's got colour in it, you could slop all over your guitar if you wanted to. I'm sure it would look quite interesting. The amount of true oil, it's not cheap exactly, but it's no more than a few quid's worth of true oil going in there to make this finish. And a bit of, I've chosen to put some vintage looking lacquer onto the neck, but you don't have to. It comes ready-made with a light layer of lacquer on it anyway, a kind of silky finish. I just did it because I quite like the more sort of yellowed vintage look. So, you know, not a lot of money at all on top of what we've already done, what we've already paid, which is amazing. It's a really, really fun thing. I mean, I would have to say that for those of you who have kids who might be, you know, vaguely interested in playing the guitar, or if you think they've even looked at your guitar in a funny way in the past, this is definitely, this is without a doubt a great value investment to get them into the fun of making something. I'm just going to put the first string on, and once I've got the first low E string on, I'm just going to stop and have a quick look and see what we've got, because it's at this point we're going to be able to make an assessment of whether the neck is sitting correctly, or whether it's too low and the strings are never going to get down to a decent action. We can make a broad judgment about the kind of basic geometry if I got it sitting on the saddle correctly. So, without putting it under too much tension, I've got now about 5mm over the last fret here, and the question is, have I got 5mm of adjustment room in this? And if I haven't, then before I put any more strings on, it makes sense to put a shim on this neck, because if I wind these down, you may not need it, but yeah, it's good to check. You don't want to be either at the absolute top or absolute bottom of your travel. There's different implications. If you wind your bridge pieces all the way down, you tend to get, your palm ends up hitting these grub screws that stick all the way up, and that can be fairly uncomfortable actually if you're somebody who really should have two strings on there to balance this out, but it can be very uncomfortable if you're somebody who likes to palm mute, which I quite do. So we're nearly at the bottom, and we're still showing what looks to be about 2.5 mils, something like that, certainly, whatever it is, it's more than I would ideally like. And right this second, I can locate the string height guide. Okay, actually it's not as high as that at all. I'm miscalculating. So there, okay, the action is sitting on the E string about where I like it, which is 1.5mm on the last fret. And we are down at scratchy hand thing. It's absolutely fine. It's presumably the way this guitar was designed. It probably wasn't designed to have an action as low as even that, because they will know, the manufacturer will know, that at 1.5 we're probably going to get some unpleasant buzzing from uneven frets. Now we're going to overcome that, because that's what I like to do most of all. So probably unusually we're going to get lower action out of this than you would, probably most people would expect to get once they just put their kit together. So it makes me think, given I want to go that low, and do I really want all of these little grub screws? And this is a point where I can make a decision on this. Do I want all of those grub screws sticking into my hand at all times? If I were to raise the bridge, raise the neck up a little bit here, it would allow me to raise up the strings a bit more. Then I've got an increased distance over the pickups. Do I want that? Can I raise the pickups far enough to bring it up to where I need it? Questions. Questions. Well, scratch, scratch, scratch. It's sharp. It really is sharp. The problem I've got is, to get rid of this altogether, I would have to look at raising this. Let's say we want to get rid of the sticky up bit. It implies, I'll just use this as the guide, but it implies that I need to, let me just get this in place. I would need to, yeah, I'd need to raise the neck by about 2.5mm here. Then we would get the playing action I want, with the grub screws sunk right into the barrels here. And 2.5mm higher string is quite a way over the pickups. There may be other ways you can soften these off by, in fact you can put little things on top of them if you really want to. If it's that important, you can put a little rubber cap or something on them, or even some plasticine, anything that will just stop it sticking into your hands. I don't like that part of the Fender bridge design, I have to say, and that's why I always thought I was much more of a Fender person until I started playing with Les Pauls a bit more, and then realised the thing I really liked about Les Pauls was in fact the Tune-o-matic bridge, because it didn't stick up any higher than the string, or barely any higher than the string. So it's a kind of give and takey swings and roundabouts. But in the world of the Les Paul, a really nice solution that I like is the wraparound bridge, because it gives you the lack of scratching on the palm that I like you get with a Tune-o-matic bridge, but without the other complications of the Tune-o-matic bridge, including such things as rattling saddles and difficulty in intonating and so on and so on. So for many reasons, that's why the wraparound bridge is a really, really good solution. And I would, even if I had an expensive Les Paul, which I don't, I've got a really nice Les Paul copy by Raleigh, I'd be tempted to replace even the Tune-o-matic bridge on that. If I was going to do a modification, it would be to get rid of that and replace it with a single piece. Of course, I would then end up having to fill the stop bar post holes, but that's that's for another day. Okay, so I'm just going to go on while I'm here and finish the rest of the strings. Again, I'm not too precious about these strings, because I will bin them when it comes to final setup. The process of doing the fret leveling is going to require me to sort of string this up and move the strings around a little bit, so it will put them under stress for a while, and there's every likelihood that kind of stressing weakens them. So I'll sacrifice them. They're only, being Harley Benton strings, but actually the cost value to buy is only about £1. So it's just a cost in the successful setup of the guitar, as far as I can see. Just looking at the string tree here, it's a little bit off to one side, not absolutely ideally positioned. That's one of the, again, one of the slight weak points you might find is those little details. It's just pulling the string a bit too far to this side. If you really wanted to, you could fill it and reposition it. If I was at a loose end on a weekend or an evening and I wanted to tweak something, I might do that, just for the sheer kind of OCD satisfaction of making everything line up exactly in straight lines. With the stringing, I go through in a straight line through the tuner post, and then I pull back 1 fret's length and start my winding on from there, and I make sure that as I wind, that the held string goes over the loose free string the first time round, and then the second time round I make sure it goes under the loose string, so it creates a sort of locking clamp, self-locking thing. And it's not perfect, but it's a little bit better than not doing it. Okay, feel the strings. Here goes my, probably, I don't know what this is. I think it's a set of 9s by the feel of it. I've read the instructions in the Harley Benton guide actually, and they are really, really clear, surprisingly well written. For somebody who's new to this, it would make quite a bit of sense straight away, which is not bad at all considering Thomann, who retail this or manufacture this kit, are a German business. But they've made sure they got the instructions right. Like I observed right back at the beginning, this is the only kit that I've heard of so far on the market that has instructions at all in the first place. So it's quite something. And when I did my first kit a year or two, 2 years, actually 2 years ago, according to Facebook. Everything is related to Facebook, isn't it? So first kit I did 2 years ago. There were no instructions at all, and I had to not only had to go and find everything online, but I also had to do all the measurement myself because there were no holes drilled either, and that was intended that way. You just got a blank body. You had the major cutouts done for the neck and the pickup, the routing, but there were no post holes or neck. What else was there? It was an SG, wasn't it? So yeah, there were none of the other control holes drilled, and I had to actually drill some of the pathways for the wiring too. So it was quite a big undertaking for a first time endeavour, including gluing the set neck, which was great fun and really satisfying to know that you'd glued together a whole guitar and it stayed in one piece. And it's still in one piece, showing no sign of falling into parts either. Okay, I'm just looking where we've got, all looks good. With this I'm going to do the usual thing, just going to stretch the strings a bit before I even start attempting to tune it. And remember, this is only a kind of very crude test, just make sure everything works and just to get a feel of how well it plays out of the box, because remember, most people or a lot of people who would buy this wouldn't have the means or the experience or the confidence to start tackling fret leveling jobs and nut slot cutting and stuff like that. So most people will be, or the majority will be, playing it as is, as constructed out of the box. And I'm really interested to see, practically speaking, how playable it is at all. Is it just would it be in the end a total disincentive? Because it's great fun, simple to build, really satisfying experience for anybody. But if you get a guitar that at the end of it is unplayable, it sort of defeats the object. Now I know, judging by the feedback, that isn't going to be the case. It's got a great reputation already, this thing. So first thing I can observe is they're completely different first fret string heights, or first fret action is different across all the strings. That's not great. I'm also seeing that, okay, I've got the action not set down here, so somebody would get on and do that, so we'll get on and do that as if we were just going to play this straight out of the box. What I'll do is I'll just give it another stretch before I tune it up one more time, before sort of starting to plug it in, and then I'll go and get a strap so it's a bit realistic. I'll stretch it, tune it up, adjust the action, tune it up again, strap it, and then see what we've got. Because all of these things I'm going to do now are just things that somebody could have done out of the box. I can't comment on the tone obviously because I've replaced it with much better quality pickups. But again, judging by the feedback on the Toneman website, the tone of the originals are not bad at all. And people comment on it specifically that it's good. So. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to aim for my ideal playing action on this thing, and then I'm going to let the condition of the neck tell me what's possible, and I'll sort of back off as far as I need to go in order to make it playable. So I'm going to go for 1.5 all the way across, and I would expect there to be some problems with that. So these are obviously the height adjustments are done in pairs, so you're sort of doing one half and the other half, and they do behave independently, kind of. Okay, this is quite low still. What's going on? Okay, where am I going? I'm way off now. That's where I need binoculars. No, microscope. Down you go, come on. Give me 1.5. Stop messing about. 1.5, okay. Now let's go to the next one. Both sides. Obviously the middle one's going to be level, ideally. A bit low on that side. 1.5. And then aim for the same on the top. Plenty of spiky grub screw sticking out. That's the price you pay for working the fender way. I won't bother about the intonation right now. I'm really just looking at getting a sense of how this plays, or if it plays at all, on a setting that pretty much anyone could get straight out of the box. I'll see what we got any minute now. And then there's the, shall we plug it in and hear the sound of those pickups? Ooh. Why not? That's what we've done it for. I'll keep the amp down the bottom for the time being, so this isn't the sound test, because without the strap I'm going to have to mess about a bit. Let's go to a clean channel for a start. Let's get the people have said that the selector switch is very stiff, and they're absolutely right. seeing straight away? Well, like I said, slightly different actions over the first fret, but not massively high. Probably a bit better than I'd expect. Pickups are out of range a bit. I feel like they're out of range. There's not a lot of power coming off them, so I'm going to give them, hopefully, a lift. Hopefully they're not too tightly squeezed into their sockets. It should be alright. I'm just doing it. I'm not doing it precisely right now. I'm getting a sort of close as I can get in a hurry. Sorry about the delay. Normal service will be resumed at some point. It's quite difficult to get this one up where I want it. These three screws have had to go through, cut their way through into the brass housing of this pickup to get it to fit. Okay, well, a bit more still. So in lots of ways this is where it's quite difficult when you're putting new pickups in. So I'm having to be really careful to press down as hard as I can, so I'm not going to mash up the ends of these screws. Okay, it's not exactly up the top yet, but let's get a bit more. I'll give that a squirt of goo. Impressive. Not my playing, by the way. Impressive as in it plays and I haven't heard any problems, and that's on my chosen action. So straight out of the box somebody could get a 1.5mm action out of this using the default nut settings, even though they are a little bit uneven. It's not so much that's damaging or getting in the way. And on a neck that at the moment is pretty much dead straight and probably needs a bit of relief, but you know, this is for somebody who's just put the thing together and is probably most confident or comfortable just using the pre-supplied bridge adjustment doofer. So yeah, impressive. I'm really pleased with that. Obviously I want to tweak it so it's better, it feels more comfortable to me, but I'm really pleased with that. It surprised me. I kind of did and didn't expect to be able to lower it to 1.5 and get it to play. And if we want to be really adventurous, we could take it down a little bit lower and see what we can get away with. Probably would help to put a tiny bit of relief in the neck too. But let me stop the video for a moment. I'm going to go and find a strap and be back for testing it out a bit more thoroughly. Absolutely right. It's way too stiff, that switch. You have to really bash it to make it do anything. Either replace it, or I don't think there's anything you can do with it. You just got to get used to it. Most switches you just don't handle that hard. So initial impression then with the strap. First of all, it's actually slightly neck heavy. With a decent strap it won't matter. That's the result of it being basswood and not hugely thick, so it could do with a bit more weight, just for that balance thing. It's not about emulating another guitar, or, you know, the classic original. It's just about, you know, we don't want it to do that really. Particularly when you find that if it is top heavy or head heavy, you find yourself kind of doing a lot of holding it up, you know, and you're living with it kind of in that position just to keep it up. Anyway, this amp is not up to the pickups, I have to say. So does what you'd expect. It's got an incredibly well, this is tone rider pickup, so this isn't obviously not the Harley Benton ones. Middle pickup's got a nice warm usable rhythmy sound. The neck pickup's got a nice lead sound and very cutting rhythm again on the bridge pickup. I was quite surprised to notice that I don't know if it's well, I suppose it's microphonic, isn't it? I was surprised, very surprised. The neck pickup isn't microphonic, but as far as I can see, well, no, that's not microphonic, but this bridge is. So much so that when I'm touching the tuners or doing anything around here, I'm really surprised at that. I'm going to go back and check and see whether that's the way it's meant to be. Well, at 1.5mm, sort of straight out of the box with a little bit of twiddling here, and no adjustments to the truss rod or to the nut. That is a perfectly playable on its cheap Harley Benton strings. And tuning is staying fairly stable, mainly because I've stretched the strings, but very stiff switch, tiny bit of crackle in the controls. But like I said, the main thing that concerns me is the microphonicness of this bridge pickup. Maybe it's meant to be like that, I don't know. So anyway, yeah, verdict then. Harley Benton kit, straight out of the box, easy to stain, easy to true oil over a couple of days, absolutely dead simple to put together, only complicated if you're changing out the pickups for something else. Tuners straight on, no problems at all. Harley Benton strings, piece of piddle, and I don't know what their pickups play like, but even if they're just sort of so-so, then you've got a really simple fun guitar to put together. And the neck pocket is dead straight, and the testament to the neck, the quality of it, is the fact that I can put it on straight away, lower to 1.5mm at the end here, and just play, and there's no choked notes. There are a couple of tiny little spots of zing, minor, but that takes me right back to the beginning where I did it with checked it with the fret rocker, and I was surprised at how few uneven frets were showing up and how mild they were, and that kind of expresses itself in how easy it is to play straight out of the box. So yeah, can't fault it. Good on Harley Benton. Apart apart from the switch. But my feeling is, if you're going to buy one of these just to do up, just to make and play for the first time, then you wouldn't really worry too much about that. But if you're going to do it to spend extra time making the neck level and precise, so you can have more control over your action, then it might be. And if you spent money on upgrading the pickups, as I've done here, then you might seriously want to just consider a different switch in there and maybe replacing the electronics altogether. Why not? Because this has moved away from the 55 quid guitar, and I'm spending more time on it coming up next, doing the fret leveling. And as you can see, that there isn't a lot of leveling needed to do, but what I will do is just get that extra bit of action leeway, which we can take it down a little bit further if we want, and also just clean up the surfaces of these frets, which at the moment are a little bit rough, but they're not bad at all, considering. And they're a lot better condition, and this neck is a lot better put together, or a lot better finished than the first one I bought about 2 years ago, which was a gold top, which only cost about £100 as well. I mean, this is half the price of that, and the neck is quite a lot better from out of the box. So, and of course, we haven't done anything with the intonation yet, and just as it comes from the factory, it's sort of, it's not precise, but it's not far off being intonated. Very close, so it wouldn't be much trouble at all to get that spot on. Yeah, great verdict, fantastic. Do it, get it, dye it, put some oil on it, spray it with a bit of vintage goop, whatever. I've just sprayed nitroglycerin on top of the original polyurethane on here, so that's all I had, and I just wanted to do a quick finish. I don't have any spraying equipment, and I just wanted something out of a tin and get on with it. So yeah, it does a fine job, and this finish down here, the True Oil, is just dead simple. You can't go wrong with it. I haven't got very far. I haven't tried to sand it back to anything other than this gloss finish, and I'll probably just leave it like that, and over time I'm sure it will dull down. But if you had to go and play this now, even in a band, you could do it. It's that close. There's no show-stopping bits to it. And also you've got good testimony as well to the condition of the fret. It says you can bend long way, bend quite a long way without getting any chokes as well, and that's a really good sign. Although it's not a very curved radius, so it's probably about, it looks like it's about a 12, not a 9.5, but there you go. Brilliant stuff. Get one. You'd be mad not to. See you again soon. Oh yeah, well, I'll see you again for the fret leveling very soon, but for me it might seem like hours, but for you it'll seem just like a flash. So folks, the last word on this is that there's no way that this bridge pickup should be so microphonic. So I've been back to Amazon just now. Oh God, I've got my phone buzzing away. Sorry. Been back to Amazon just now, and they've issued a replacement, so I'll be replacing both of these with the new set that come. Which is annoying because it took me long enough to get these things in, but they don't compensate you for that. Anyway, so that will solve that problem. Nobody else's reviews make any mention of microphonic pickups at all. These are quality. Tone Riders are a pretty good quality set, and I've had no problems with them so far. So this is clearly not right. Meanwhile, I'll carry on with the fret leveling anyway, so that can go ahead. So it'll be a couple of days before I get the replacement pickups to go into here, but that's fine. Got other things to be doing, so I'll come back to you in a minute when I've got the fret leveling sort of machine ready to go. So see you in a sec. Okie dokie, so now I'm going to get stuck into the fret leveling. Before I do fret leveling, I'm going to make sure that there's three things I want to take care of before I do anything, and that is to ensure that the playing action is where I want it to be, and then to make sure the neck relief that I want is there, and to make sure the nut slots are cut right, so give me the action I want over the first fret. And again, I've had not many, but one or two people over time tell me how wrong this order of events is, and it seems to work for me and for the guitars I work on, so not really kind of interested in being told how wrong it is when it patently works and produces good results. So, you know, just hold back on that if you have a disagreement with it. Always interested to know your view, but not to be told I'm useless or that your view dominates the world and is correct. A bit like religion, I don't want to hear dogma. So this does work for me, and so what I do is I set the neck relief, put a little bit of neck relief into this guitar, which it has now. It didn't before. I also then want to make sure my playing action is set where I want it, and I've pushed this down. This is really so impressive about this guitar. I've knocked this down now to about what is it, maybe a millimetre. Actually no, it's still on the bass side, it's still 1.5. It's about 1 on the treble side, so I could go down even a tiny bit further, but I think this is about nice for, you know, nice level for it. And this guitar, amazingly, pretty much plays all the way through that. Although it is starting to buzz a tiny fraction, but that's amazing. There's no choking or anything. So this guitar is kind of almost there in terms of its frets for this kind of action. But I'm going to do some fret leveling anyway, as I always do, to take away that last bit of buzzing. Now on this, with the neck relief set as it is, and with the action set really low as I like it, I'm going to now look for see what the first fret action is on this guitar. And the first fret action is really important because I'll finish my sentence, because this really has the biggest impact on how the guitar feels to play in this area and to fret chords. So for beginners that can be a really tricky process. Often people think that the only action on a guitar is the action here, and if they find it really hard to play full stop, they kind of blame it on what they see as the high action, and as it happens it's usually also high here because the underlying frets can very often mean that it can't go any lower. So people think that this action here, and they quote, you know, the action at the 12th fret and go, it's about, you know, 3 millimeters, therefore it's hard to play. Well, bizarrely, counterintuitively, you could have a 3 millimeter action here. I wouldn't want it. It's twice as high as I want it, at least twice as high. But you could have a 3 millimeter action here, and if you got this action low enough and correct, then actually it would feel quite nice to play here, and it might struggle a bit further up here. But it's usually it's often people's experience of this being very difficult to play down here, and that's usually a result of the action being too high on the nut. So first of all, that causes discomfort, and secondly, it causes intonation problems, because if it's any higher than a certain amount, you're bending the notes down, cause the string to go so sharp that the notes you fret down in this area are slightly sharp, whereas all the open strings in typically open chords are playing cleanly, and the two things together make an unholy grunge mess, and it really, to somebody with even the slightest musical ear, can sound horrible. So my thing is to take care of the action here to make it easy for anyone to play, including and especially beginners, and also then to make sure it's good at that end as well, so that it's a nice low action all over, but to make sure that the nut settings, and the neck has the relief in it that we need. Now, I've said this a couple of times in previous videos. Normally, when you get a guitar, the playing action is dictated by the condition of the underlying frets. So, let's say you bought a guitar second-hand from your mate. Your mate will no doubt have had the guitar from the shop or out of the box or whatever, and he or she will have taken an Allen key, little hex key like this, and lowered the bridge, the saddles as far as they can go, whatever kind of bridge, whether it's a tunematic bridge or whether it's the Strat style. They will have lowered it as far as they can go, and in search of a low action, and then they would have found it choking off and sounding horrible, and they would have backed up away from that so that it played acceptably cleanly. And that resting point where they stopped would be the default action, but it's only dictated by the underlying frets, the relative unevenness of those. So instead of having a guitar where the action is set by the condition of the frets, we're going at it the other way around. We're saying we're going to choose the action in this process, and then we're going to make the neck comply with that action that we've chosen. So I'm choosing how I want it to play, and I'm going to then use the fret leveling, the precision fret leveling process, using the truss rod and having the neck under load. It's interesting, you see a lot of luthiers and people talk about expensive jigs they've bought which quote unquote simulate loading of the strings, and some of them by pulling down on the neck in this place and pulling up on the neck in other places and so on. And what they're doing is they're simulating the curvature of the neck, but they're not simulating the loading. The only way you can really simulate loading is if you are pushing the neck under compression, i.e. there's something pulling from end to end. And that's why being able to level the frets with the strings on is really probably it's the best way I can think of doing it. And I didn't realise it was possible until I came across a tool called the Katana, which is a great tool. For various reasons I can't use it. The inventor took offence, or took umbrage at the way I was praising his tool and trying to recommend it to others, and just made it so unpleasant that I didn't use it. I stopped using it, and now I use a version of it that you can make yourself from a truss rod. And it's a shame because I was quite happy to promote that tool, but it just it was an astounding act of customer service suicide or something. I don't know, publicity suicide. Anyway, so what I do this with is the same principle, so I'm very grateful to that tool having shown me that principle. I wouldn't have known it before, but I do it in a way that you yourself could do at home. And save yourself a considerable amount of money. Now I'm currently looking for another little piece here, and I've got it. So how the hell do I do this? Okay, so I'll come to the fret leveling again in a minute, but let's go back to the nut slots. So this is the final part of our three-part thing. Neck relief, playing action down this end, and then finally first fret action, which I'm going to do now. And I want it, these are all above 3, just slightly, and I like to work on a 0.3 on this kind of action setup. So I'm just going to slack this off, and I'm going to work outwards from this string first, and I'm going to measure the action. This one is almost dead on, so really hardly any adjustment on there, but I'll do a little bit. So the idea is when you're using your nut files, you just want to cut backwards, so there's an upward slope towards the front face of the nut. That's pretty much spot on. I don't want to do any more to that. It's almost there. So again, a plus thing for this, I'm very much a plus on this guitar, is how relatively low these were to begin with. I'm going to give all of these a going over with a little bit of sandpaper afterwards, because what you don't want is this pinging when you find that the string is binding in the slot. Again, this one it's very close to being there, and looking at the shadows cast, I'm going to leave that exactly as it is, so it's not even worth giving that one a crank. But this one, the last one, we'll try this. Now if you get this wrong, it's going to cost you a nut at worst. At best you'll get it right, and it will really improve how this guitar feels to play, and also sounds if you're curing intonation problems. If you get it wrong, you can do a cheap fix with super glue and bicarbonate of soda, or bone dust, as I've got from previous nuts that I've sanded down, and you can put that into the slot and put very low viscosity super glue, runny super glue in there carefully, and it will form a cement that you can use, and then you can recut it with the nut with a file again, so it's really useful. So those three are pretty much exactly the same. Now I'm going to knock off the top two and work outwards from the G, and for this one I'm going to use only the top two files because I don't want to go into the tightest. I don't know why, it gets really at the tiny thinnest files, I find it starts to really bind on the strings, even though they're the correct. These are actually slightly larger. This is a gauge, a file set for a 10 gauge, and I'm actually using 9s. I still find that the 10 on this 9 slot is just a bit too tight. It's really weird. Anyway, so working on the G is often the one that can cause problems. For some reason it's often the highest one in the mix, and it is here today. Not by a huge amount. As I said, this isn't a bad starting point, this guitar, but it is enough to make me want to do a little bit of work on it. And what you have to know that the string is sitting back all the way into that slot. If you haven't got enough tension on it to make it sit back in the slot, you can get fooled easily. So if you've got a set of strings in you don't mind sacrificing, I would recommend that as you're doing this you go back up to tension. Sometimes in a hurry, or when I haven't got spare strings, I will not bring it all the way up to tension. I'll try and save the wear on the strings and hope I get by with it. But and that is about spot on. Now the B, get this in tune. I'll run the B back in. And again measure this. I can see the fresh air under that, so I can tell there's room, to go down with this. If I'm going down to the 0.3 all the way across. This is now under playing tension anyway. I've just moved it, so I don't need to tune it up in between, because it's quite easy to move these thinner strings across by comparison. It's easy to get carried away here and overcut, so if you're doing this and it's unfamiliar, when I started doing this, I would, and I probably still have available, a spare nut. So if it goes wrong, I can always dig this one out and replace it. Your eyes are very sensitive. I can see by the shadows cast this is at the right height, so I could put this under here. There you go, just starting to buzz. And then tune it up, which it is, and then go to the last one. Go nearly up to pitch, see a bit of space, lift it off the side and go in. Now, as I say, always err on the slow side, the delicate side. You can keep taking a little tiny bit more off, but you're running into trouble if you have to start building it back up. people say that when you build it up with the bicarbonate of soda and super glue, it's not as good a substance as bone. I'm not too sure. I found it to work really well, and I haven't seen it wearing, but maybe I hadn't played it long enough in any stretch. Okay, so that's done. I have now a 0.3 of a millimetre first fret action evenly across all strings, and I guarantee, even though it's hardly changed at all, it feels more even to play, and it plays easier. So that's a tiny little adjustment, and that's the secret of the nut for me, is that if you know, pound for pound or millimetre for millimetre, we're talking really small amounts here. Some folks often get horrified at the idea of having an action as low as that. I discovered, as you can discover yourself, if you put a capo on, let's say, a first or second fret on your guitar, and then you go and measure, say that's your new nut, and you go and measure that action under there, I can tell you now that's even less than the one I've just set. That's probably about 0.1 or 0.15, so it's half the action I just set, and it will play beautifully. Rings, sings, and you never, by the way, will get intonation issues when you've got the capo on. If you think, I can't stress it enough, if you've got a guitar at home that you just think, I can't get this thing in tune, you often blame the tuners, or you blame the bridge, or you blame the nut slots, or whatever. I've found that one of the common things when people say they can't, their experience is that they can't get the guitar in tune, it's this intonation problem here caused by this action being too high. And the difference can be, I've got it at 0.3. If this action is 0.6, it's usually too high, and you'll start getting intonation issues, which will make your open chord sound like this. Hear the difference between that and that. So I should really have it plugged in. I'll do it just to make the point, because it's so important. So important, the modification. And some people who, it seems to me, that have learned their stuff through, I don't know, reading the books and being told this is the way it should be, kind of stick to an idea that, you know, it has to be this and that's it, a certain amount and that's it. And it's a bit like being taught to indicate in your car whenever you manoeuvre, even if there's no one else on the road. If there's no one else on the road and it's completely empty, don't indicate. You know, you need to do it consciously. So it's the same with this thing. When it's not tuned, let's tune it up quickly. Just for working purposes, right? God, that switch is stiff. There's a nice tune, there's a nice open chord. It sounds that sweet because I'm not having to squeeze too hard. So the fretted notes are true in tune with the open notes. When the first fret action is too high, this is what your guitar sounds like. Sorry. Hear the difference. Out. In. Out. And what's happening, I'm just faking it here to give you to show you the difference, but it's when you hear that kind of, you know, if you're musical, you know that this isn't right. And if you don't know what's causing it, often you get people who start to retune it again, they go back and they don't trust their harmonic tuning, and then they go back to a meter and tune it on that. And then they grab the thing again and they play it and they go, this should sound nice, and then they go, oh, I can't live with it. And what they want is, they're getting it's caused by, more often than not, caused by the height of the strings over the first fret, and the fact that once they're above 0.5 or 0.6, you are by definition pushing down harder to get them to the fret, and that causes them to go sharp. So it follows equally that taking them back to a really low action over the first fret takes away that propensity to do it, and you get lovely intonated, beautifully intonated chords. It might be, now if they're out of tune at this end, or it doesn't sound perfectly harmonic at this end, that's where it could be the intonation caused by the overall length of the string, which is where you set it here. But when it's down here and it's sounding like, oh, why doesn't it sound good? You just know it. It's because your fingers are having to press the strings too hard to get them to the first, or to the frets they're trying to get to. When that C should sound more like, assuming that they're all tuned to begin with. So I've experienced this myself when I first didn't know what it was, and I spent months just describing it as, I just can't get this effing guitar in tune, and it drove me absolutely mad. I didn't know any other way to describe it. To me, this was, I just couldn't tune it. I knew the tone was lovely, the construction was beautiful, everything about it meant that it should play nice, but it just didn't. And the only way I could describe it is like, I can't get the damn thing in tune. So I've heard lots of people describing the problem the same way, and they think it's about all the different components or something essentially wrong with the guitar, and they must go and buy a more expensive one. And I've cured it time and time again by just removing 0.3 even of a millimetre from the action height. And the point I was making is, people get really freaked out thinking it's got to be a certain defined height according to the specs. Well, you know, if you want to prove to yourself it doesn't, if you've got a guitar that you're struggling with this problem and it feels like you can't get it in tune, and you have even a sense, a hint that it might be what I'm talking about, you can prove it to yourself by sticking a capo over wherever, tuning, once you put the capo on, tune it to true, and then play a chord, right, and the same open chords. Now this may not sound great because the capo is this is a crap capo and it's putting too much tension on, so it's making the strings go sharp. But if you tune up after you've put the capo on, you'll suddenly find all these open chords that, when you're playing it like this, sound terrible, suddenly sound beautiful. And you're playing them on a new guitar, effectively, because you've cut off the headstock and you've put a new nut there, right? And you're calling it this fret. And basically, this new guitar, with the only thing that's changed is the height of the strings above the new first fret, which is where the next one after wherever you put the capo. And when you put the capo on, if you're thinking that 0.3, I'm taking the mickey by making 0.3 of a mil is too low, I say, put a capo on and you get your feeler gauges under there, and you'll find that it plays like heaven. Nothing's buzzing, nothing's rattling, nothing's hitting the deck. It's not in tune for the reasons I just said. Plays beautifully, and it's about 0.1, a tenth of a millimetre over that new first fret. So I could be setting it down here to a tenth of a millimetre and it would play nicely. I go for a conservative 0.3 because that improves it enough. So there you go. Sorry to go rambling on about that, but it's the reason I do ramble about it and go on and people find it far too long and boring, but the reason I do is that it is the most profound improvement out of all of them that you can make on your guitar for either the price of a set of nut files, and to be honest, if you don't even want to buy into the the wisdom that says you have to have nut files to do it, and it's your own guitar and you don't particularly have to worry about selling it, you can do exactly what I've talked about and what I just did with one of these. And this is I think it's about 10 files in a £6 set, and they're diamond coated. They're a bit worn out now, but this little triangular file, this thing will cut as far down in a V notch as you want. It's not the prettiest thing, but it doesn't really make that much difference. I can cut down with this and stop when I've reached 0.3 over there. I can cut the next one down and stop when it reaches 0.3. I can cut the next one down and stop when it reaches 0.3, and lo and behold, they'll all play. All that will look different is that there'll be wider notches at the top, and some people think that looks awful, and that's just you give me a good strong argument why it's awful, and then maybe I'll buy into it. But just because it looks awful, you want to improve your guitar, you haven't got any money, you can't buy these expensive files, you can't take it to a luthier, get one of these out of your dad or your mum's toolbox or whatever, and on your own Strat, do this thing. All you care about is get the first fret action down to a nice low figure around about 0.3, 0.4, providing that your action is set roughly the way you want it at this end, and aim for 0.3, 0.4 millimeters over here, and stop going downwards when you get to it. Now, people say there are these things work in combination. Of course they do. If there's no point in me telling you to go for 0.4 if the action over here is 1.5 feet, right? The strings will be like that and you'll never get to it. So it's obvious that there is a dynamic relationship between the following three things: height of the strings over this first fret, height of the strings over the last fret, i.e. set by the bridge, and the curvature in the neck. So you've got to get those right. But if you get the first two, the bridge and the neck, approximately right, a little tiny bit of space in the middle of this when you hold the first and the last fret tells you've got a little bit of curvature in it. That's all you need. You can measure it if you want. You could say it's I never bothered to measure it. I never have. Some manufacturers give the value. I suspect it's probably about 0.15 as well, and I have to use that monstrous capo thing again. So you stick it on the first fret, hold down the last fret, and some people go the 8th fret. Well, there's the 12th, 10th, 11th, 10th, 9th, 8th or whatever. Okay, so I've currently got, does it play? Yes, so I've probably got 0.2, right? So let's say 0.2 of a mil as my amount of relief or curvature. That's all you need. Get your action down here the way you ideally want it, and then if you were to just use that and set that at 0.3 or 0.4 if you don't want to go too far, and see what difference that makes. And don't listen to the people who will tell you have to do it a certain way. You can do things lots of different ways as long as you are doing something that's going to improve the way your guitar plays for you. And it's interesting, I've had people telling me it's all the wrong way at the same time as I'm showing people out the door with their new guitars, which they love the way they play, and then there's somebody else online saying it's completely wrong and it's a disaster. Well, if it's a disaster, you wouldn't be showing people into your workshop and they wouldn't be buying guitars from me and sending me feedback saying how much they like the way it plays. For example, I'll give you an example. I took a Harley Benton guitar that I bought, actually. It had the name rubbed off. I just liked the way it looked. I got it at a reasonable price and I bought it, and it turned out, I've done a bit of research, it's a Harley Benton. Anyway, I set it up. I think it had already had some decent Wilkinson pickups, so I did my setup on it and I put a Morris logo on it and sold it. And the feedback I got from the buyer was that he said, fabulous setup, better than my Fender Strat. So there you go. If it's wrong, it wouldn't be like that. So anyway, enough chin wagging. Having got the three things the way I want them, now it's time to move on to leveling the frets, and this is where the fun part comes in. You've got to be brave and you've got to believe in what you're doing. So this is the way I'm doing this is born out of how many setups have I done now? Probably about 175. Some people have done hundreds of thousands, but in the last year or so I've done 175. So it's evolved out of that. So what you're going to do, we're going to take a neck that's already pretty good. We can pick the fret rockers up if we want to. I've kind of converted mine temporarily into nut slot files by sticking some self-adhesive sandpaper to them. Almost perfectly sized this Stumac fret rocker to act as a really geometrically sharp, precise nut slot file, sandpapery file. So I don't have to be whacking around with chisels in there. I can just work it down, and really, if I'm disciplined, I get a really nice clean slot out of it. Anyway, there you go. That's another tool you can make yourself. So what we'll guarantee is if I test the frets on here now with a rocker, we will see some, or hear some, a little bit of unlevelness, but not a lot, because the way this is playing already tells me tiniest bit already tells me that it's a very good condition in terms of relative evenness, so we'd hardly have any work to do on this. Little rocking noise. So the fret rocker will tell you, and it'll tell you audibly when you've got unevenness, but it's minor. So we're really fine-tuning this. But why not? That's what this is about. It's about getting the precision out of this. Why do I do this? Well, you've probably heard me say loads of times. I love to take something that costs virtually nothing, that I suppose the brand name snobs would tell you is a pile of cack, and show you that not only does this neck come with fewer uneven frets than just about any brand name neck that I've ever seen, but also it can be made to play superbly well with a bit of attention, and I really like that. I like the fact that you don't have to spend millions of quid to get something that works really well. Now what I'm doing to begin this whole process, it's a bit tricky when it's all fully strung. I possibly could have done this in advance when the strings were, before I strang it. But anyway, I'm going to mark across the top of all of these frets, because this marker pen will be the guide to tell me how my special fret leveling file is working. Now remember, we don't have very much unevenness in here at all, and that's confirmed by how well it already plays at the relatively low action that we've got it set at. That's a real marker of how good how well made this neck is. Straight away, it's just how it plays at a low action. So we don't have much to do, but we still need the same principle, which is to work our fret leveling tool over the frets until they're all relatively even, i.e. each one's even compared to the next one. So this marker pen is a technique that's really useful for knowing, you can see what's happening, because as soon as the file bites into the metal at the top of the fret, it'll let you know, because you'll see the silver shine through. It's a bit fiddly, this process now, unfortunately. I'm trying to think of any quicker way of doing it, but it's really important to do it, so take your time. And if you've got a maple fretboard, do not slip at this point, because you will be struggling to get marker pen off lacquered maple. I don't know why, probably because it contains a solvent that, I don't know if it eats into, maybe it's because it eats into the lacquer, I don't know, but it resists removal very quickly. As soon as it's dried, it's very hard to get off. Now I don't mind getting, no problem at this point getting marker pen on the strings, because I'm planning to bin these when this operation is complete. So these are sacrificial strings, but they have to be here because they are providing the playing load to keep this guitar in a under tension mode. And under tension, as you've seen already, also means that we've got some curvature in the neck. So you'd be forgiven for asking the question, how the hell are you going to level these frets if the neck is curved? Even ever so slightly, but it's still curved. And here's how we do it. We're going to bend this truss rod, which is one I bought especially from StewMac, and it's got sandpaper, self-adhesive sandpaper, 400 grit on the bottom of it. And I bought this one. I've had a few different versions. This, by the way, in case you're looking for it, is the tool that showed me that this was possible. It's a nice tool if you've got the money and you want to buy it. I have no hesitation recommending it to you, even as I recommended it previously. All I say is, don't use it on a YouTube channel yourself or have a view about it, even if it's positive, because you might find yourself in somebody's bad books. Anyway, so buy that if you've got the money, but failing that, you can use pretty much any truss rod. So if you pull apart something like a Fender Squier, a Squier Strat, you'll find a truss rod inside it like this, coated in a bit of plastic. If you take the plastic off, what you'll find is a rod with a thread mechanism on it, and welded to the rod in two places is a bar, a long thin rectangular bar, and when you shorten the rod by screwing this in, the bar can't shorten. This can, because the rod the rod itself is kind of screw threaded. So the rod can overall get shorter, but the bar can't. So because the bar can't shorten, it bends and creates a curve. And this one is the one I sort of started doing it with, and it's great because it's very thin and you can work in strips over the radius. So start far away and come towards you, and you really respect the radius because you're just doing thin strips. You're not kind of flattening the radius out. However, much as I like this one, I felt that it was a little bit too flexible, and that if you pressed on it you would change the curvature, and it's really important that you keep the curvature of this tool exactly the same as that of the neck. Even though it's microscopic, the whole point is if we want this microscopic accuracy, we've got to match this perfectly and then keep it. So I found this one at StewMac, and the reason it works better is because it is sheathed in a kind of an aluminium box, a bit like the katana tool I showed you first, but this one is kind of much more rigid, and so and it's harder to put the curve into it as well, but once I wind the curve into it that I need, it'll stay like that throughout the process until I change it again. So how do I make this curve, or this tool, match the curvature of the neck? And here's the miracle. Use 3 little feet of the same size. Now I've used, there's all manner of things you can use. I've got a few different ones here just to give you an example. And I don't know how you describe them, but on YouTube it's sort of clothing manufacturers use these little screw-on studs, whether it's screw-on studs or whether it's screw-on brass bolt nuts, whatever they're called. You just need something that stands up high enough above the strings and is exactly, you can guarantee that these 3 things are always the same size. You don't want there to be any significant difference. So a manufactured thing like these of the same size, whatever you choose, is ideal. So I found these little brass nuts work absolutely perfect. Domed nuts, that's what they are. So what do? Well, you put them on the fretboard. If you're going to do this, you might as well go to StewMac and buy the bass guitar version of this. I bought the 6-string guitar version, which as a truss rod doesn't have to go every bit of the whole length of the guitar, but ideally I would like a longer one, so the next one I buy will be this one but slightly longer, so I can cover the whole of the neck. Nevertheless, it works. So what I do is I make sure first of all the 3 feet are equidistant on this fingerboard, and I start in this channel here, so between the 1st and the 2nd strings, and I'm going to map this curve 3 times as I go. I'm going to do it once on this edge, once in the middle, and once on this side, and I'm going to change the curve if I need to, if the curve actually changes. It might not, but I will check it 3 times as I go across. If I wanted to be really precise, I'd put it in every channel as I go and check it, each channel or each string. But my experience shows that 3 times is usually okay. So how do I match this curve to the curve of the neck, which is now under tension? I put this down first on the left hand nut, and then I lower it onto the other 2, and I look and feel where it's hitting, and then I go from side to side, and what it's showing me, I don't know how well you can see, but right now it's hitting that one first, and when I go from side to side it's moving that one and not moving that one at all. So that tells me that these 3, the middle one of these 3 is sitting lower than the other 2, and it means that it is doing that because it's in a curve. I don't need to measure that curve. All I need to do is I know that because this isn't touching it, I know that this truss rod isn't curved enough to meet the top of that nut. So what I do is I get my truss rod or my Allen key, and I just twist a bit to put a little bit of curve into that truss rod, and I try it again. Still no touching, it's not touching the middle one. So I'm basically continuing to bend the truss rod into a bigger and bigger curve, or a steeper curve, or a more increased curve, until it contacts the middle one and moves the middle one as much as it moves the end one. And now it's starting to move the middle one, and it feels like it's hitting both of them at the same time. It's very hard to describe how you know that, but it's comes with experience. And in fact, if anything, I can see it now skidding over the end one, so I've gone too far. So lots of minor adjustments, but the great thing is once you've got that, it'll stay in the same place because it's much more rigid. So it's still a bit too curved. Now what will happen if it's too curved, it'll give you cuts on the frets in the middle and it will kind of miss out the end ones. Conversely, if it's too straight for this curve, you'll cut the edges and not the middle. And so the first thing we look for when we use it in a minute is it cutting somewhere on all three main parts of the fretboard. If it is, we know we've got the right curve, because it couldn't do that unless we had. So that's one of the kind of indicators. Now that's still too curved in the middle. It's hitting this one first and not moving the end one. So I'm now just microscopically backing off to get this curve right. Okay, now it's moving both. I'm going to stop right there. So that's my curve for that outside track. Now what do? We take off our feet, and this is the interesting bit. We drop off the first string, we hoik the B string into the G slot, and I get this thing, which happens to be an electrical block connector, but it could be anything that does the job. And I'm going to put it between the B and the E, and I'm just going to push it open down here over that pickup, and I've created myself a space over there. Well, the strings are still pretty much under tension. Here's the fun bit. This is where you've got to have a confidence and a bold spirit. I'm now taking my truss rod, which is microscopically adjusted to fit that curve. We didn't do it by measuring. If we'd done it by measuring with vernier calipers or whatever, we would get it wrong, because you cannot accurately see and mark these dimensions. The fact that we've used this three feet device is such a beautifully simple principle of maths or whatever, is that we can only be perfectly modelling that curve if those three things touch simultaneously. There's no other way you can have it. You can't touch those 3 points simultaneously unless you have matched the curve precisely. Anything else, you'll either touch the middle one only, or you'll miss the middle one. If you touch all three, you've got the curve to a microscopic level. Now what we do is the following. Under gravity, and just basically only holding this file as much as needs to keep it running down the kind of track that we want it on, and pretty much relying on gravity and gently working this file backwards and forwards. And I'll tell you straight away what's happening. Let's take a stop and a look. It's already done enough to monitor progress. Now the great thing is, if you do this at all, then you just stop at every point and just throw your tiniest Allen keys on the floor, which is really a vital one, and I don't want to lose it. Hold on a second, let me see if I can find it. Oh, right down by my feet, thankfully. Magnetic screwdriver. Okay, yeah, so we can diagnose every point of the way what's happening. So first things first, we can see it's cutting here, here, here quite a bit, here quite a bit. All of these frets, it's taking some metal off. It doesn't appear to be taking anything off this swathe in the middle, and it's taking a bit off the end. Now straight away that puts me on alert, and it says double check your curvature. Right? I think I got it right, but I'm just going to double check this, because that is a symptom of it not being curved enough. So it's no harm in giving it another go. So I'm going to double check to be on the safe side. This is about precision, remember, and we want to get this right. So anchoring it on the first thingy. Well, according to this, if anything, it's making a monkey out of me. According to this, this should be, let's make sure these are all exactly in the same distance away. I mean, we can either do that by pushing it right to the edge and making sure that they're all at the same distance from the edge, or we can line up to some other point, but as long as they're, broadly speaking, in the same track, is the better idea. Okay. Now, bizarrely, if anything, this is telling me it's ever so slightly over, which would strangely produce the opposite result. Now there is a reason, by the way, there is one other reason why you could be getting the cutting at either ends. It could just be the fact that those ends are actually higher than the frets in the middle. You have everything aligned correctly, the curves are matching correctly, and if the frets at each end are in fact higher than the others, then you will get that. That's the effect you'll get. So I'm going to trust it, and this is where you have to have your nerve. I'm going to trust it because this is working. Science is working. It's not subject to opinion. So I'm just going to carry on and let the file do its work. Now when you have when you're cutting the frets, in the case of leveling frets, you are always working, you're always wearing down your higher frets, but you're always heading towards getting to your lowest frets, and that's the interesting bit. You're always aiming to reach your lowest frets if you want absolute levelness. Okay, let's stop for a minute now and let's do a physical test. So the nice thing about doing it this way is you always have time on the ability to check it in the real world. So I've taken off the little spreader, I've put the strings back in place, I want them roughly in tune, put the guitar into a playing position, and I just want to check the way the notes play. Now if they play cleanly all the way up the fretboard, I'm not going to take any more off, I don't need to, I'm going to stop at that point. That's very good. That's pretty good. It's not absolutely perfect. So in the quest for completely out of this world precision, I'll just do a little bit more. The E is really good. The B has a tiny bit more to do. So I'm to that end, I'm just going to pull the fret leveling file just a little bit closer this way to kind of concentrate on the B track, if you like. What's making it clunk is the fact that it's too short for this fretboard, and it's just gently hitting the frets as I go backwards and forwards. Okay, now I'm going to put that back in. See how little work you have to do on a good neck like this, compared to some of the necks I've had where you feel like you're taking half the metal away to get them level. Well, given that that's running at a millimetre action at the 21st fret or whatever it is on a Tele, I think it's 21st, that's pretty good. That you wouldn't expect to find that normally. Okay, so that's the first strip. Now I'm going to place the feet in the middle because I now want to recheck the curvature of the neck in the middle. It does change. You won't see how much it changes often. It's very subtle, but it's enough to register on the tool you're using. So this is going to tell us how much it's changed. Okay, so we need to increase, by the looks of this, we need to increase the curvature to get into this middle part. Good thing about doing it with the strings in place too is that it's holding these things in exact alignment with each other, so I don't have to worry about them staggering off in different directions. So when you see a listing of mine on eBay, and you see that I'm charging more for let's say, I don't know, a Fender Esquire Stratocaster than you could see someone else selling it for, this is the reason I am, because I'm doing this to it, because it's going to play a hell of a lot better afterwards. So I'm jamming these strings off to the other side, and this time I'm going to open up these two strings, and again just creating a channel for me to go down. And so I'm working on pairs of strings, and I've got the action the way I want it, and again I'm just going to let gravity mostly do the work. And I just really, I want to be right in the middle of this track because I want to get both of those string tracks done. What it's doing is it's still showing me that the frets that were already cutting are doing so again, which is kind of what you'd expect. Very often the relative highness of a fret will carry on across the fingerboard. Sometimes though it doesn't, and sometimes it stops midway, and it could be that it's sticking up higher on one side than another. It's very normal for that to be the case, so don't assume that the same level of highness is going to go on all the way across the fret. So we're now checking the G and the D. A little bit more to do. More to do. So really nice process, using your ears, your fingers, your eyes to see what's going on, and to basically, when all said and done, you're trusting to the way it plays, because everything else is equal, is the way you want it. So you're making this neck now work with the action that you want the guitar to have, and that's a really cool thing to do. But these are, you could hear from that last run that these got some way to go before they're level on this strip, if you like. But I won't just keep on going forever until it's ground the frets right down, which you won't do, by the way. It'll take quite a lot of hard work to wear them to nothing, especially when they're new like this. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop and check each time. And if you think this is a slow process, you're right. But then think about how many months, weeks, years you're going to play this guitar. And so of course it's worth doing. It's going to give you loads of pleasure, so why wouldn't you take your time at this point? You might have the TV on, or your favourite music, or whatever. Getting there. Better than before, but still a little bit of a way to go yet. So yeah, why wouldn't you put in this time to get it just right? After all, how long is it really going to take? An hour? This bit? 40 minutes, something like that. As you can see, or you might not be able to see precisely, but as you can imagine, that as we level these frets and make them level relative to each other, in some frets we're obviously introducing a flat spot on top of them, and that's not going to be either accurate or fun to play. So you can sense that after this we're going to have to reshape those frets whilst retaining the relative levelness, which is quite a challenge, but it's easy to do, and I'll show you. A little bit more. Yeah, it's easy to do. We have a tool for reshaping the frets that we flattened, or we can do it by hand. So if you don't have the money for a custom tool, it's perfectly doable by hand. It takes a little bit longer, but it's also that much more satisfying, and actually it's a little bit more accurate, in my experience, because you can control very accurately when and where your file stops. So if the key thing is to not take any more off that surface to retain the relative levelness, then hand doing it with a file, the triangular file, the old-fashioned way, leaves you in more control over how much you take off the top of the fret. Almost. I'm going to do one more little bit down here, and then I'm going to move on to the next strip. again, remember, this is why having these sort of disposable strings on here is a good thing, because you're constantly pulling them and shoving them. Again, I'm just going to do another check. I'm going to try and follow the dot marker line of the center of the guitar in this case, but I need to make sure that these things are as accurately spaced apart as possible. I just want to double check this curve just in case it wanders. Still looks to be just about okay. If anything, it's a tiny bit over curved, but marginal. This is very difficult to get absolutely exact, but the point is the differences are microscopic, so if you're getting very close to it, you are very close to the right adjustments. The way I described it is that I was trying to describe the difference between leveling frets with the neck off in the passive flattened condition or doing it this way. And I would sort of, the numbers aren't really accurate, but I describe it like the improvement you get from an unleveled sort of raw neck, the improvement you get by just doing it in the passive way, so by using a truss rod to flatten the neck and then using maybe a beam or something that's dead straight, that will improve your playing or the relative levelness of your frets by, let's say, 80% jump improvement. Doing it this way will give you an extra 10% and bring you up to 90% accuracy, but the biggest improvement can be done without doing this, but this is a fine tune on top of it. Stop there. That's good enough for this low action, and I'm just going to go on to the next bit. It's quite, might be struggling to get the string to stay there, but I'm going to bump the other string over a little bit. Doing so does change some of the tension a little bit, but it's okay. It's not going to be such a massive amount that it changes how everything works. Okay, so my final strip down the guitar, and again I'm checking to make sure we've got the same curve. Possibly a bit too much. That's just, the amounts of slacking off is so tiny. Touching all three, I'm going to go with that, and then we're on the last strip. So probably one of the most important reasons why this technique is really useful is, yes, it gives you that extra 10% improvement that you might not otherwise get. That last little bit of extra accuracy, but the other reason is because it allows you to level the frets by only taking off as little as you need to make the guitar play the way you need it to play, the action you want it to play at. So sometimes with the flat fret leveling tools, you end up, or it's tempting, or you tend to end up continuing to level until you've taken the marker pen off all the frets, so that you know that everything's pretty much level, and then you could check with the rocker and stop then. This way we can set this to play nicely, and you'll see that we probably haven't even touched some of these frets, which are probably still a little bit lower than these ones here, but they're not so much that they show up, the problems don't show up in at this level. if we try to go below 1mm, then that's where that remaining unevenness would show up. But why take more fret material away when we're not realistically going to go below 1mm's playing action? And certainly on the treble side here we're at 1mm already. So it's just pragmatic, you know, fret material equals fret life or guitar life. Keep going. Yeah, fret material equals guitar life, so we definitely don't want to be cutting it away willy-nilly. We definitely want to be careful and preserve as much as possible. So I'm working to that principle of as little as we can to get away with the playability that we want. So I can feel that there's obviously some choking certainly on this D string right at the top there. So we need to expect to cut away a bit of the frets up there to bring this to a evenness. I can see it cutting quite strongly, but we will expect to hear the difference in a minute in the hopefully the reduction in the choking that we were getting there. So how long have we been doing this bit? Well, it's over an hour, so this ain't quick, but it's worth it. That's the thing. So that's no longer choking, so we're getting there. The E is playing clearly anyway. Occasionally at this low action you can sometimes also still get a bit of buzz from the truss rod, for the neck still requiring possibly a little bit of truss rod adjustment, i.e. a bit more neck relief, but we can always put that in afterwards. So I'm concentrating now on the A track, which is still the one choking off a little bit. But we should be there pretty soon. Now after this part of the process, before we get on to the reprofiling of the frets, I'm going to want to mask off the neck so that, or fingerboard, so that we don't make any damage any of it. Obviously this we can do because none of this tool there's nothing about it that's going to touch the fingerboard. There's no risk to it at all. You'd have to be doing something amazing to actually contact the fingerboard. Almost done. I'm going to do the finest smidgen more, just to be on the perfectionist side, and why not, eh? Every time I use this I think of one of those little Imperial walkers in Star Wars. It's like one of those with its head and legs pulled off. Anyway, you know, Star Wars, that thing that's bursting back into our consciousness right now. Okay. So an hour of careful hard work just to level the frets, just inverted commas. So you know, that's why, no apologies really, that's why a Reloved guitar costs what it costs, because this will be, at least if this was your guitar that you brought in rather than one I've made out of a kit, but if you brought this in it would take about 3, if not a little bit more, depending on the state of the guitar, at least 3 hours to do this, and it will take that long if you want to focus on the accuracy enough. But these tiny amounts combine to make a guitar that either plays beautifully, or if you don't do it, plays averagely. and the feedback I've got so far seems to suggest that it makes a difference from pretty much all the people. Right, so there you go, I've finished my levelling, okay, and I'm going to put away my little bits and pieces, the feet and my tools in their normal hidey hole up there. After Christmas I'll probably buy one of the longer truss rods just so I don't get that little clunking as I'm doing this part of it. Okay, so next part is I'm going to mask off this guitar, ditch these strings because they're done for, and I'll come back to you when I'm ready to go with the next bit. And by magic the guitar is swathed in masking tape and we're ready to go on the fret reprofiling part, which is where we reshape the frets to make them smooth and arch shaped or hump shaped as opposed to flattened, and where we also then polish it with varying degrees of sandpaper until we get a shiny playable surface. And the reason we have to reprofile the frets is because while some of them are now have a flat surface on top, that changes the position of the kind of central point of intonation and can obviously throw the intonation out, but also it kills off sustain and deadens the string a little bit, and also makes it very difficult to play. So our objective is to reshape all of these frets, and we do that using a tool. Now we can either use this tool or we could have used a three-sided tool or a three-sided file, which is kind of nice and, what's the word, peaceful, kind of meditative practice where you just kind of go up the side of the frets and then round them over towards the top, but you aim to leave that little thin line down the middle, which means you haven't touched the top. Now this tool is designed to do the same thing and does it very well. The only downside of it, I suppose, is that while it's doing it, the fret top is hidden from you, so you have to trust that it's not taking any. So you run it over the top, and as soon as you either get to the thinnest little line of black you can, or if in the first swipe like this it takes off all the pen, then you know that this fret can't be reshaped anymore with this tool. Run it over this one, and there it's a little different. This was flatter, so there is down the centre of this now I can see a distinct line, and I'm just going to gently use the tool until I've worn that line as thin as it can be, and then I'm going to leave it and move on to the next one. Logically, if we leave a bit of material as much, or if we can end up with a little thin line of black pen, it means we haven't touched that part of the fret, so that means that the relative level that we had between all these frets is preserved. That's the objective. There's no point doing this, all this fret levelling, only to reintroduce unevenness. So we've, compared to many guitars, we've not really done a lot of working or flattening of these frets, so I'm really only having to just run them over a little bit. We'll find some more at the end, but there's not a lot to do. And most of the reshaping that's needed now on these will be done by the sandpaper as we head towards polishing the frets out into playing condition. So you can see on this guitar, because of the relatively good condition of the neck, or the frets, before we started doing any levelling, we're finding that this process is really quick. And that's to Harley Benton's credit, because some guitars I can spend 20 minutes or more on this part of it, working away, trying to turn flattened surfaces back into nice arch-shaped things. So we're nearly done, and then we can move swiftly on to the polishing part, and then we'll be ready to restring it and give it another go, knowing that our bridge pickup is faulty at the moment, but we'll put up with that. It's not the end of the world, but it's a shame. Okay, so having reshaped the frets, now the next part of this, the final part if you like, is to sand them out. And this takes quite a while, so I'll get started and tell you how it works, but then I'm going to cut off because it just bore you to death. We're going to use 3 different things to do this. We're going to take, first of all, 600 grit paper, 4 sheets of that. I'm going to use it to get out all of any marks that the file's left. Once I've done that, I'm going to use 4 sheets of 1200 to get out all of the 600 grit marks. And then once I've done that, I'm going to go over with 1500 through to 12,000 set of micromesh papers, which are very, very good at polishing out to the final shine. And at some point in the way I'll use a block to do that. But to begin with, I always like to use my fingers, because what we're aiming for to start off with is we don't want any more. No, we're going to take some material off the top. We have to polish it. But what we don't want is to take more than we need off the top. And we certainly don't want to flatten it any more than it is. So the idea of this is to go over the frets in such a way that accentuates or recreates their curvedness, like a arch shape or a hump shape. And the best way I found to do that is to use your fingers and kind of press downwards over the frets, letting your fingers slide up. If you've got fingernails in there a bit as well, better, all the better. So I'm just letting my fingers kind of bounce up and down and into the gaps. I'm hoping to get as nice and round and smooth a set of humps as we possibly can. And all the while we're trying to make sure that we give all parts of the neck the same amount of treatment, and we need to tack this down so it doesn't roll off. If that comes off, you'll damage the fingerboard, so we don't want to do that. So when anything comes loose, just add more masking tape. It's much cheaper than having to buy a new neck. So yeah, you've got to, because the 600 grit paper and the 1200 to lesser extent, but because these papers are abrasive and you can take material off, if you stay in one place more than any other for too long, you will gradually introduce unevenness back into the game, and we don't want to do that. So just be conscious of moving across the whole of the neck as much as possible, and with the aim of getting rid of the flat spots in a smooth and kind of uniform action. Okay, and so I'm going to carry on doing this by hand until I get down to the micromesh, and then I'll miraculously reappear with all the masking tape taken off, ready to restring.